Hello, hello. What's up, my Support Fibromyalgia friends? It is Friday. Happy Friday to all of you. I'm going to throw down some science for you today, and hopefully my internet works. Sometimes when I do these Google Slides, the internet gets a little wonky, so I hope you can all hear me okay, and everything works out for this presentation as we're going to dive into a little bit of science and fibromyalgia and genetics. If you're tuning in live, please definitely leave us a comment. Let us know where you're tuning in from, or leave us an emoji and like and share this information. I am Melissa Tolwar. I am the executive director of the Support Fibromyalgia Network. I am also a board certified functional medicine health coach. So I'm back to these contents of like sharing the slide. I want to thank everyone for cheering on the fibromyalgia delegates and really supporting Fibromyalgia Awareness Month. I know we're still at the tail end of May, so anything can happen with more awareness, more advocacy, bringing it for the fibromyalgia community. We are definitely lighting a path forward for change, so celebrate each other and all the hard work and accomplishments for all the advocates out there for the month of May. There were a lot of awareness events happening, and even across other chronic illnesses as well. So I didn't get a chance to support some of the communities as much as I like because of all that was going on in May, but we definitely want to give a shout out to everyone. It does feel like there's a lot of stuff that we have to put out and keeping up with content. So shout out to everyone out there. Okay, so I just want to make sure we're going to talk about fibromyalgia and genetics. I've talked a lot about genetics before. I've even shared my strategy and reports, and it keeps coming up in different ways. I do want to let everybody know you don't need to understand necessarily your genetics or have a full genetic report in front of you to make some of these lifestyle changes or things that might be involved. And especially the concept with epigenetics comes up. But I will say to please keep comments constructive, especially for those that we get some comments sometimes. And I know, like, we've gotten to a point where we feel better and we'll bring in our own bias. And I'm going to say that even I bring in my own bias when it comes to that. And I love hearing what's worked for people. So please keep sharing the things that have worked for you and how you've been able to improve your quality of life with fibromyalgia. But I do ask that we kind of leave some of that judgment at home with forcing it on other people, and just acknowledge for some of us, we do come with a bias. So I really focused on brain health to improve my quality of life. Many of you know that the Walls protocol and the Bredesen protocol really helped me, especially on a nutrition side. And that's my bias that I bring in, especially because I train with both Dr. Terry Walls and in the Recode, doing also my clinical studies with the Karazian Institute. I'm also a certified keto nutritionist. So I'm going to bring in some of my bias, but I have to acknowledge not everything is going to work for everyone. And in what particular order it's going to just change, and especially based on genetics. And I'll bring this up too, of a personalization or even a spectrum of some of the diseases. I have pretty gnarly genetics because I've done a lot of genetic research on myself and genetic reporting. So I do have the type of genetics that slow the entire system down, which is something of an interest to me and why I studied it, because I really wanted to know why I declined super rapidly and was getting worse. And I know there's some undiagnosed autoimmune component that no one's been able to figure out with me. But these contributing factors, and some of the contributing factors that I have on my side, contribute to some of the symptom severity. So if other people have those similar genetics, we have to understand and be more compassionate that certain modalities may not be as effective for certain people, especially if we are predisposed to certain genetics and how we process things. So some of us may have to be extra careful, or maybe more diligent on what we do, or some of the lifestyle changes have to be more impactful. I'm kind of feeling like I have to do everything as natural as I can, which is a challenge. I mean, I live in Los Angeles County, so doing things as natural as possible might be a challenge for me, and maybe even considering a move one of these days. I kind of feel like my body is the type of body that might enjoy being more in a homestead if I could figure out how to grow all my food and go as completely natural as possible with no chemicals, since I have high chemical sensitivities. But I understand my genetics and I've kind of put it together to make a lot more sense and how it can help improve my quality of life. And like I said, you don't need to know all this stuff, but I do encourage people to understand the differences across the board and how this could actually affect different people, because in the different modalities and treatments you try, some things might work better for others, depends, or sometimes it might take longer. You might need to actually be more stricter in certain areas, and it might be the whole combination of different modalities that might help you based on different susceptibilities. So it is much more complicated than people like to assume, but I do want to acknowledge that there's some bias. So depending on who you're working with or which expert you're talking to, they're always going to bring in a sense of bias, but we want to educate, right? The big thing is open-minded education, constructive conversation with each other, because the goal here is to improve the quality of life for all of you. And, you're each living different circumstances. So please keep that in mind as we go through this presentation as well. And then I need to keep that in mind too. So everyone out there leaving comments, because sometimes we get very forceful judgment comments, and I just want to let people know to keep it constructive when it comes to all of this. We do have a prevalence survey that we were working on with Veteran Voices for Fibromyalgia and the Fibromyalgia Pain Chronicles. So I'm going to post a link. If you are watching this on Twitter, you will not be able to see the links posted. So you may have to go to YouTube to actually check out all the links. I'm going to add all the links after the video in the description section of the research that I'm referring to. But this prevalence survey, this family prevalence survey with Veteran Voices for Fibromyalgia and the Fibromyalgia Pain Chronicles that Support Fibro collaborated with, we want to get definitely over 2,000 responses. So please help us out. You don't have to live in the United States to fill this survey out, but we're trying to understand some of these dynamics. This is patient-centered, patient-driven research, because we want to push the envelope on some of this research. And I was really, really happy to know, and when I was doing my research for this presentation, there is a lot more genetic research out there, which is encouraging. Some of it is a little dated, and we need to renew it with larger case studies. So this is what we would keep asking for, is more robust research studies. So more participants involved, as opposed to maybe 10 or 12 people. We need this more robust collection of data so that we can move forward, and also studying genetics and the modalities within the genetic system, how it predisposes us to fibromyalgia, any connection to autoimmune disease, because we do see people in other communities, and the prevalence is much higher if you're living with a rheumatic condition or an autoimmune condition, that you would see fibromyalgia within your family system. So that's why we launched the survey. So definitely spread the word, let people know to help us fill it out. It's quick. I've heard it's quick, and it's not a daunting survey at all, but it's definitely helpful for us to all know what is happening within our fibromyalgia community and get diverse voices as well. So I'm going to kick it off with this reminder that, and let me widen out the screen. So genes don't act in isolation. And there's a lot of conversation too of genetics are not our destiny, and how lifestyle factors can contribute. If you're predisposed to genetic conditions or have a history in your family, might have a genetic susceptibility, but it's not necessarily your destiny. Obviously, if it's a hereditary disease, there's other differences there. So this is where the study of epigenetics comes in. So there's a lot of conversation on that, how you can turn off some of these genetic pathways. But I wanted to remind people too that genes don't necessarily act in isolation, which makes it difficult for research actually, because you're studying these combination of genes together and how they affect each other and how they might occur. And then addressing them in isolation is actually very difficult to do. So I wanted to bring up this chart for you. So this is actually going to, I've done a video before on my strategy and report as I dove into a lot of my genetics. So this is really me. So this is part of my genetic report as well. And I'm just showing you these combinations of genetic SNPs together, and it's not acting in isolation. And this is only part of the methylation pathway. But this methylation pathway for me is super slow. So I have to keep this in mind. And doctors will never, I met a lot of doctors that were like, I have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to this. But I had to put the pieces together. So you can see that I'm slow from the very beginning. And some of these SNPs get discussed within fibromyalgia. So you have SLC, MTHFR. So my whole system is already like starting off slow. And this is what I saw within my genetic patterns as well, within different pathways. So I have very slow pathways, especially for detoxification. So this could be a contributing factor as to why my severity of fibromyalgia got very bad. So I was declining very rapidly in this process, and just understanding like this is an area. So if you have sluggish area right there, how that contributes and blocks other systems. So you kind of think of it too as if you get a new phone and then you add all these apps to it and it starts to get bogged down. You take videos, you take a lot of videos, you take a lot of pictures. So it starts to just bog down the processing system from there, start to affect battery life. So this is kind of the idea of it. So if I clog up this whole other area with some of the lifestyle factors or other contributing factors, then it's going to affect the other systems. So there's tons of other systems here. This is one of the COMT SNPs that gets studied pretty frequently. And it was a study actually on this because of pain processing and its connection. But you can see how complex these pathways can really be, and how even in the neurotransmitter section, how it can really affect different things. And so we still have to dive much deeper into the science of fibromyalgia, much deeper into the science of human health, and understanding how genetics can predispose us to disease, but how we can also affect genetics differently, slow down, speed up different pathways potentially. And there's been some great conversation about that moving forward, which is definitely exciting. So just referencing to some of the COMT studies. So actually Dr. Lipton was on this particular study and the association of COMT with the single nucleotide polymorphisms and its connection with ethnicity and sex in a large cohort of fibromyalgia patients. This was a big study with a big cohort of people. And again, I will definitely put links to all of these studies that I reference in the description section if anyone is interested in going through some of this research, because there is a lot. I'm only including a little bit of this as we move forward to talk about genetics and fibromyalgia. And of course, why we need more robust research. We need this to be a component, especially in understanding pathophysiology. But this was one of the largest studies that to date when it was studying the COMT, sort of these halotypes and any of the minor alleles found in it. They really wanted to just focus on some of these aspects of it. And obviously, we need to understand the exact role. So that was kind of the conclusion for this study, and how it varies in widespread pain conditions. So we definitely need more insights into understanding the underlying pathways of fibromyalgia. What we do know is familial patterns do exist, and people do appear to have a genetic susceptibility or a predisposition to fibromyalgia. It's likely going to be a combination of genetics and other causation or other factors that may trigger the illness. And we haven't really narrowed it down because it seems like it's multiple factors, so multiple genes together as well. So there's different ways that people have seen the activation of fibromyalgia, either with a stressor type of event, some sort of accident, surgeries, illnesses, viruses, so those kinds of things of the onset. And just a reminder that a genetic susceptibility to fibromyalgia doesn't mean you'll end up with it. Genetic susceptibility isn't the same as hereditary disease, but we are noticing familial patterns within rheumatic and autoimmune conditions. That's why I think it would be great to do some sort of overlapping study, especially with our lupus friends, because it is definitely dominant in the lupus community, and it'd be kind of fascinating to study populations, a large population of lupus looking for fibromyalgia within the lupus community as well, or other conditions where it's prevalent. And I know it's hard to distinguish in these genetic studies too, to get fibromyalgia as the primary, because there are some underlying causes and things like that, especially with overlapping conditions of like Hashimoto's. So it'd be interesting to try to figure out within these populations if we can get to some idea more on the genetic side. Here's just another fibromyalgia family study, and we go through all these details. So in these studies, siblings of fibromyalgia, the risk of developing it was found to just be over 27%. So we are seeing a lot of this information come out. And again, these were done in the past years. So we're just trying to figure out how to move forward when it comes to some of this research and what we're kind of seeing when we dive in as far as percentages. So we do see it in a lot of family systems. Why is that? Does it contribute with lifestyle factors as well? And where does it get passed on forward? Is it mom, daughter, son, like type of aspect? You were other people maybe and our grandparents not diagnosed? So, or is there an autoimmune component in the family? I think this is why it's all fascinating and more research needs to develop. This was one of the other major studies, and I really hope you probably have to dive in. And again, I'll put these links. Was in this 2017 review, Scientific Literature of Fibromyalgia. We're really seeing credible evidence to exist and support that genetics do play some role. So in one study, 52% of parents and siblings of someone with fibromyalgia had some clinical evidence of the condition, even though none had previously been diagnosed with it. So this is kind of like, as we're diving into some of the details, also from this study, this was a pretty large study, that kind of overview, and we got to keep replicating this, got to keep doing it in larger cohorts as well. In a study of children whose mothers had fibromyalgia, researchers found that 28% of the offspring had fibromyalgia themselves. By comparing siblings, they determined that it appears to be genetics. So, not environmental exposures or psychological factors alone. So, they were starting to see more of a high occurrence rate in kids. And this, I mean, there's going to be a lot of discussion, especially with the epigenetic researchers too, because environmental exposures or other systems and how that gets passed on through the genetics. So we can have really robust conversations on this. They did find, and it was interesting that they noted in this, that there was evidence to suggest the pattern of inheritance in fibromyalgia is mostly autosomal dominant, meaning you only need one parent to pass along the relevant genes for you to be susceptible. So, autosomal recessive inheritance, you need a copy of the relevant genes from both parents, which is actually much rarer. So, having one parent to pass it on. And again, please, parents out there, don't pass judgment on you with the genetic susceptibility. We cannot like necessarily control these outcomes, but that's why we need to get more information out there. And that's why even discussions too, mitochondria inheritance, all of this as we learn from other diseases, we need to kind of look at some of these other diseases and see how this gets passed on. And it'd be important to share in parallels with fibromyalgia. And that's why it's like, is this going to be more on a spectrum of results based on the underlying genetic susceptibility of where you're at, plus more environmental causes, lifestyle factors, contributing causes, what that looks like to accelerate some of the predisposition. But it's a robust, there's no cut and dry answer for this. So please remember that. Another study, some research suggested that about 50% of susceptibility of fibromyalgia does come from genetic factors. So we're starting to see this, right? Gene environmental interaction has been proposed as a triggering mechanism through epigenetic alterations, but in particular, fibromyalgia appears to be characterized by hypomethylated DNA patterns in genes implicated in stress response, DNA repair, autonomic system response, and subcortical neuronal abnormalities. So that sentence was big, right? So it's not just one pathway that we're seeing. So multiple genes working together. And this is why it makes it much more complicated to figure out some of the genetic predisposition when you have multiple patterns that can coexist. So you have that, which might predispose you to fibromyalgia, but then you also might have genetics that predispose you to other diseases. And so I always use myself. I'm definitely more predisposed to getting Alzheimer's and dementia because of my genetic susceptibility. And this could be why brain fog seems to be the most severe of my symptoms and rapid onset. I've noticed that now that I can differentiate between some of my symptoms, that I'll get brain fog really super fast. Inflammation in the brain is a huge thing for me. So I have a lot of contributing factors for neurodegenerative disease, as well as potentially some of these predispositions to fibromyalgia. There could be a connection too. So there's a lot of overlap with other diseases. And then differences in the genome-wide expression profile of microRNAs were found among multiple tissues, indicating the involvement of distinct processes in fibromyalgia pathogenesis. So we have a lot of different paths involved. Further studies should definitely be dedicated to strengthening these preliminary findings in larger multi-center cohorts. So just what we said, we need larger cohorts of people. That way we can identify reliable directions for biomarker research and even for clinical practice. So this is all important messaging to go along, and why research is so important. And this type of research becomes even more important, which is, it's a difficult balance because we need research in treatments that will actually translate to the doctor's office. But then we also need research like this to verify pathophysiology, verify biomarkers, to also acknowledge the existence and what's going on with fibromyalgia. And again, we've had multiple gene targets with research in the past, and some of the areas that they've looked at with studying is pain transmission by nerves. So this is a particular area they look at genes. Pain processing by the brain and nerves. So this is another area they're examining. We saw COMT, catecholamine system, which deals a lot with the decreased pain threshold. So why do we have this amplification of pain? Is there something within that system that contributes to not being able to tolerate pain, and that inhibitory pain system kind of goes haywire and dysfunctions? Serotonin pathways. So a lot of genetic research has focused on these serotonin receptors, transporters, and regulation. Also, another area of research is the dopamine receptors. So looking at dopamine and all the neurotransmitters within those systems. But again, it's difficult with research because we're looking at how it plays a role together. And then again, if other people have more susceptibility to things, that might be a contributing factor as well. There has been research that's shifted more to genome-wide association studies and microRNAs, which is completely fascinating. And some of this stuff you can see with the microRNA targets for fibromyalgia. So we are making some progress. We definitely need more. That's why we need to encourage our researchers to focus on fibromyalgia too. But in this particular study, we found abnormalities in more than 220 microRNAs in the expression of nearly 150 genes. So that's a lot of multi-genes involved with this, and that's why it makes it much more complex. Many of the abnormalities, though, were linked to musculoskeletal disease and immune system disease. So there's again this connection of where it got started with musculoskeletal disease, probably the overlap we see with other rheumatic conditions and then things like arthritis or even immune system disease. So this is the question of where it parallels with autoimmune disease. Is there a connection? Are certain people more susceptible to triggering an autoimmune disease as well if you already have an autoimmune disease prevalence in your family? So that this is not going to be a straightforward answer, but they see a lot of overlap in these areas as well. And then here's just more research again. There's a lot you can dive into. We definitely need more updated research, but I'm excited when I see research from the last few years as well. So the influence of pro-inflammatory cytokines and genetic variants in the development of fibromyalgia. I've shared this before because this is a lot of the research. You can dive into more of the details and particular genetics that they're looking at. Just because they're challenging in this condition. They know it's challenging. They know we need to get some sort of clinical profile of fibromyalgia, and how and why does it overlap with a lot of rheumatology conditions. So this makes it really hard to differentiate and understand what's going on, especially with some of the pain conditions. But I've been hearing, though, that future research should focus on the implications of these pro-inflammatory cytokines. We've been hearing a lot of cytokines when it comes to the past couple of years, but how these pro-inflammatory cytokines relate to the pathophysiology of fibromyalgia is going to be important because it might contribute to this underlying influence of even these pain-related genes. We see some research in chronic pain of understanding biomarkers, but we know that fibromyalgia, when it comes to chronic pain, is the chronic widespread pain is on the other end of the spectrum with things like complex regional pain syndrome. So it's not just pain with fibromyalgia. We get the unrefreshed sleep, we get the fatigue component. Some of us get post-exertion, which looks more like ME/CFS or SCFS. So what contributes to all of this, and is there an underlying genetic component too that we can isolate? And that's why research is so fascinating and why we need to develop more. Here's again more slides, and you can dive into more details as I share links. One of my favorites is I study a lot because I just mentioned with the connection with Alzheimer's is the APOE4 allele. And this was an interesting study that I found in its connections. The data here suggests that specific interactions between genetically susceptible individuals, so those with at least one copy of the APOE4 allele, and the environment. So in this case, it was people involved with vehicle accidents may contribute to the risk of being diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Although APOE4 allele status does not appear to modulate perceived fibromyalgia severity, but understanding that we have a lot of knowledge about the APOE4 allele and how it contributes to inflammation in the brain, inflammation for cardiovascular disease. So those of you who carry this, or if you have a parent who has had dementia or living with dementia and Alzheimer's, this might be something to look at with the prevalence and see how you feel. And especially if you're getting more brain symptoms, this might be an interesting connection to explore. Just a reminder, since functional medicine talks about that, addressing root cause. So that's why epigenetics comes in, a root cause type of medicine. You have the genetic disposition to this. You're predisposed maybe genetically, but we are still searching for other factors. People know that lifestyle factors can kind of affect this with stress, sleep, nutrition, community support. So there's a lot of different factors that can contribute to turning on, slowing down, making those pathways sluggish as well. So thank you everyone for this presentation. I hope it made sense. I was kind of going through it a little bit fast. I love my science and diving into science. So again, I'm Melissa Talwar with the Support Fibromyalgia Network. I'm also a board certified functional medicine health coach who loves studying science quite a bit. Please definitely like and support our channels. We are a nonprofit organization. We were established in 2017. So all the support you can give us on the social media channels really benefits us quite a bit. Likes and shares, and especially sharing our reels, has gotten some more extra support from Facebook if you're tuning in on Facebook. And we definitely please tell people to subscribe to our YouTube channels. We are on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and I need to add in TikTok. We started TikTok with the help of our good friend Latoya, who is tuning in over here, Fibro Flash. If you do get an opportunity, again, we mentioned we're a nonprofit organization. We are working really diligently to fundraise, to give back to the programs and communities. I'm volunteering, and a lot of our members do volunteer extraordinary hours. So the money we are looking for to fund a lot of programs coming up. We do want to launch the Fibromyalgia Conference, which will come in the fall, but we have other health coaching programs, patient education programs, food drives and support programs for schools that are coming up. So we do need the support. So if you are on Facebook, we would love it if you do your birthday donation to Support Fibromyalgia Network. And if you do have a birthday fundraiser, please let us know, because Facebook isn't always the best at notifying us. We like to send people a special thank you card and gift with some swag from Support Fibro. So let us know, because we want to tell you we appreciate you. We are looking at other ways to fundraise. If there are people out there that love fundraising, I would love to hear from you. Again, my brain is always directed to science. We want to be able to fund some support researchers too. So there are researchers that are doing crowdfunding. It would be great to have a patient-driven research project where we can collaborate with researchers ourselves and help drive the focus areas, because I know some of us get frustrated with particular research areas that keep being replicated over and over again. And we're kind of like, okay, we know that this helps, but can we get research in other areas? You can also help by adding us to Amazon Smile. We are affiliated with Frida Botanicals. They do help us out quite a bit when it comes to contributing to our programs and funding. So thank you everyone again. This is supportfibro.org. If you could do us a favor and definitely like and share our content, let people know that we are working diligently out there to make sure that no one fights fibromyalgia alone. Stay tuned for more patient education coming up. We love this type of stuff, and hopefully the internet stayed stable for all of you out there. We're going to have more interviews. We are setting up some interviews now that May and a lot of the stuff has passed. I'm going to just tune in really quickly to check. There is Latoya. Hey, Latoya. Okay, so everyone has to go check out Butterfly Chats. Please subscribe to the podcast. We share a lot of the content. She has these great products coming out with her books, mindfulness journal. We are strong believers in supporting the community, the bloggers, the podcasters, the authors that are out there. So do us a favor and support the whole community as a whole as well by buying and contributing to other people's work. Hi, Lois. So great to see you. Happy Friday, and wishing everyone a great and wonderful weekend as well. If you're doing something fun, please share. We definitely want to hear from you. I'll be working diligently to get caught up on everyone's messages and all continuing, but it's always nice. I love this, passionate about it. Susan is tuning in. Both myself and my daughter have it. Okay, and you have autumn. This is why we got to study this more and overlapping. I once heard Dr. Jared Younger at the LDN conference say that somebody needs to study why fibromyalgia is so prevalent in lupus. That resonated in my head through the entire presentation that he gave. So anyone out there doing that type of research or interested in that type of research, come on over. Let's talk about it. If you want to talk about your research at any point in time, we'd be happy to share with our community. It's super important. Clarita, thank you for joining us on this Friday. Happy Friday, everyone. Again, thank you for supporting the Support Fibromyalgia Network through May and all of our friends. Big, huge shout out to everyone doing amazing work. All our fibromyalgia delegates that were on virtual Capitol Hill Day. We're doing a lot of advocacy efforts, sending out appropriations letters, doing our part. More patient education coming up. I did have a question for you, all of you out there. How do you feel about doing a virtual fibromyalgia summer camp with a lot of wellness, workshops, creativity? Does that word resonate with you? I never went to summer camp because I think my parents thought I would come back completely bitten by bugs or broken legs and stuff like that. I was definitely a child that you might have to have kept in a bubble, susceptible to allergies and everything. But I want to see, because this idea has come in my head, virtual summer camp, right? We won't have the bugs and the camping part of it, but we're going to bring in we'll bring in some special guests to talk about particular health topics. If you have ideas on those health topics, let me know. I have a lot of friends, health coaches and doctors who specialize in different topic areas, but also creativity. We love working with Heart, Faith, and Strength. She has these creative workshops, and we want to bring her in to host some of these and art projects and things like that. So if that sounds like a good idea, let's get it launched, because our new friends at Hopin are waiting for us. We are working with Hopin, who is actually the parent company of StreamYard that we use, to launch the Fibromyalgia Patient Conference. But in the meantime, we have a whole lot of ideas for mini workshops. And that's what we want to do. So content. So if you're looking for particular content, please let us know and we can organize stuff. We want to try to keep everything virtual, accessible and affordable for all of you, and definitely have a wide variety of ideas come through for Support Fibro. So again, thank you everyone. Happy Friday. And I will definitely have a good weekend and see you next time. Bye.